She has specialized her philosophical research in philosophy of science, pragmatism, and epistemology, and also researched pragmatism at the University of Sheffield. She has been a student and practitioner of magic and astrology for more than 15 years, and she's also a writer with 4 novels for children published and a historical novel in progress. She teaches philosophy at high school level in Spain and is planning to do a PhD in Western esotericism so as to join together her passions, philosophy, esotericism, and teaching into an academic career. So the floor is yours. The title of her talk today is The Epistemology of Magic, a transdisciplinary approach to the quest for results in Ars Magica.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. This point is very interesting point for me. And, well, I'm going to talk about epistemology. Don't be afraid. It's just theory of knowledge. Okay? So, magic is one of the most controversial subjects in the history of Western culture. As a consequence, my purpose in this talk is a difficult one. I will pose the question, does magic work? And I will put it in terms that can be answered academically. For that, I will first analyze some of the causes for the denial of this as a legitimate question at all. Then I will sketch some reality and knowledge concepts to conclude the establishment of a basis for an academic study of this question. I will use the term magic in its broadest meaning as a synonym of occultism or Western esotericism. Traditionally, there are 3 main fields in occultism: astrology, magic, and alchemy, although my examples will be centered on ritual magic and on the contemporary school of Temple of Set, that is a left-hand path or organization. Now, the academic debate of magic was very well explained this morning by Marco Pasi, so I will skip it fast. When Fraser conceptualized magic as a form of primitive thinking, he had the virtue of attracting academic attention on the subject. However, although there have been many attempts to study magic, anthropology and sociology have fallen into the trap of considering magic as the other. The development of the discipline called Western esotericism in the 1990s meant a new epistemological term. Western esotericism is now considered in itself a cultural product of Western culture, thereby avoiding the biases of considering magic in a negative way. This positive way of conceptualization of magic informs my research. So I want to address now what I mean by ritual magic. Among the practitioners, I have chosen a couple of definitions from members of the Temple of Set you can see on the slides. There is a distinction between the subjective universe of microcosm and the objective universe of macrocosm. The action in the microcosm generates changes in the macrocosm. Michael Aquino, in his book Temple of Set, says magic is not about faith. It is about being critical and obtaining results. To obtain results is not a characteristic of the usual conception of religion. Instead of that, it could be related to what has been traditionally considered science. So, Susan Hack affirms that metaphors can help us to understand the phenomena, so I'm going to talk about stories as a metaphor so that you can be on the same page as me. To picture how magic works, I have chosen 2 great stories about magic, The Neverending Story by Michael Ende and Promethea by Alan Moore. Bastian Balthazar Bax is a shy boy who only loves books. He finds a story that never ends, and in it there is what we all compulsive readers dream of, a book that is a door to a magical land. Through this book, Bastian will travel to fantasy, and once he arrives, a quest for his true will begins. After losing everything, he finds his father's image, trapped in a block of ice. It is the symbol of their distant relationship. When he comes back to this world, his father was so worried about his disappearance that their relationship is transformed. That would happen in fantasy. The microcosm of Bastien has changed his environment. The same happens to Sophie Banks when she makes contact with Promethea. To help her friend Barbara, she travels through the tree of life in a Kabbalistic trip. There she finds her dead father, and the information she receives from him will change the bad relationship she has with her mother. The old family bonds will be healed. This is how magic can work. Now, I'm going to talk about the limits of scientific knowledge. For anyone interested in the historical reasons for the denial of esoteric knowledge, check the Hanegraaff book, Esotericism in the Academy. For my part, I will focus on epistemic reasons. I will talk about 3 of them: the difficulties to quantify subjective change, the problem of induction, and the nature of magic as a discipline of unique events. Periodically, there is news about the crisis of psychology. According to Meyer, in the chronic crisis of psychology, the discipline is divided into 2 different groups. On the one side, there is a pretension to make of this discipline a science by measuring its results. On the other side, the practitioners of psychology follow their own theories, and they pay almost no attention to what their scientific colleagues do. The problem is, although measurement can be helpful to choose a candidate for a job, it is of no help for patients when confronting their problems. Changing human behavior and the subjective universe is one of the goals of magic, and measurement techniques are not useful to making that happen. There is no objective way to measure human behavior according to Folsom-Siskin, but what is more important, as Weiser describes, is that the conclusions of the psychologists are contextual. A change of context makes conclusions invalid. If we try to get conclusions in magic, we will have a lot of difficulties to find common ground. In today's internet era, every magician has a different magical background. They have belonged to many different magical orders. They live in different countries, and they even talk in different languages. That makes it difficult to have valid measures of subjective changes in a scientific way. Now, Aristotle recognized 2 species of argument: deduction and induction. Deduction from general events, we can infer particular events. Deduction can be formalized with logic, and it is unproblematic. Induction, on the contrary, has not been successfully formalized. There is no logical way to get to general events from particular events. To explain this, you can see 100 ducks that are white, but you never can say all ducks are white, because a black duck could come. So Hume questioned the validity of inductive reasoning. There is no way that we can be sure the next observation will be like the ones we had before that. Goodman's new riddle of induction shows that there is no logical way to distinguish between a predictive predicate and a non-predictive predicate. This means, Rami, in his article, 2 Interpretations of Gru, explained this paradox with the image of a jar full of candies. Until a time t, all candies that are removed from the jar are green, but from a time t, all removed candies are blue. Goodman invented the term Gru to talk about the candies that were until t green and blue after t. There is no logical difference between saying all candies are green and saying all candies are blue. The problem of induction has deep philosophical implications and scientific. As Hume anticipated, from a logical point of view, there is no way to affirm that they are universal laws. We can only talk of customs, tendencies, and observed characteristics, not about the future of them. This can give us a more plastic vision of reality as something not totally formed and predictable. Now imagine a book. It appears here, floating in the middle of nowhere in this room, and then disappears. There is no scientific way of studying this phenomenon, because science works with predictable events, and this has happened only once. Western culture is sustained upon the comfortable assumptions that there are universal laws and there are no unique events. However, in magic we often don't have reproducible events. That means many of the results of magic are unique events. There is no ritual that performed by two different people obtains the same results. Not even the same ritual performed by the same person obtains the same results. The moments for change, inner or outer, are completely unpredictable, although they can be recognized as the result of the performed magic. So I'm going to establish the basis for an epistemology of magic. Susan Haack, in Defending Science Within Reason, analyzes the problems inherent in the use of science and the scientific in an honorific way. She claims there is the false idea that the only valued research is that made by scientists. That leads to the need of delimiting what is science from pretenders, as Quine has tried to do. Haack thinks that the existence of a unique method of research is a myth, even among the different areas of science. There are many valid forms of inference used not only by scientists, but also by lawyers, historians, cooks, etc. All of them use their imagination to try to find an explanation for a phenomenon, and they developed a hypothesis to test if they are valid or not. Valid knowledge is established over a certain realistic vision of the world. In the article The World of Innocent Realism, Susan has sustained a moderated realism, naive as she has called it. It is based on the common sense assumption that of that which is real. A table, a partner, the ground that sustains that, all of them are real. And there are social constructions that have been invented by human beings. But once they are established, they are also real, like money. Money is real because everybody believes in it. It is true if everybody stops believing in money, money stops being real. But its reality is independent of what I or anybody else thinks about it. Law or marriage are other examples of real social construction. Furthermore, according to Haack, reality, as does fiction, comes in degrees. There are things that are more real than others, like the legend of the King Arthur. Although it is a fiction in part, it is based on a historical leader. We have a most radical example of realism in the interpretation of Parmenides by Peter Kingsley. Parmenides says everything is real. However, the importance of reality as a category, it gives us the ability to distinguish it from fictional, so we know if we are more or less justified in our beliefs. In Evidence and Inquiry, Susan has developed an epistemologist approach to a method for justification of beliefs called fundamentalism. This method puts human beings at the center and personal experience as the basics for research. She rejects there can be an absolute truth. Instead, we can be more or less justified in our beliefs. Haack makes a difference between the S-belief, the state of belief, that means I believe this thing, and the C-belief, the content of belief. So words. The S-belief can be supported by the experiences and memories, among others. The S-belief is the first stage of analysis of beliefs, and it is a descriptive state. C-belief is related to the S-belief. It is the evaluative stage. C-belief must be explained in proportions that can be evaluated. We can talk about the reason of A to sustain a belief, A-C reasons, or the experiences that A had that created the belief, A-C's experience. While C reason can be true or false, the content of experiences are true always. Not because once we see something, it is true that something is outside, but because the experience in itself is always true. An important aspect we need to consider in this method is justification is time sensitive. That means justification must be done when the question arises, not when the experience that created this belief occurs. For example, I saw Mario yesterday, but today he sent me a message. He told me he has been traveling through Mexico for the last week. So, although I saw him yesterday, I'm not very justified in my state of belief now. It is true that I saw Mario, that is the see experience. Also, although now I have an information that inhibits my belief that he was really Mario. My third reasons are I was not wearing my glasses and Mario has shown himself a trustful person to me over the years, though he could be lying. So I'm almost not justified in the content of my belief, that is, Mario was in Northampton yesterday. So we are going to pay attention to a couple of concepts that are usual in magic, and then we will outline how we can apply epistemology to answer our first question. In magic, there is a relationship between the subjective and the objective universe. This has been called by many different names. It is called the magical link in the Temple of Set. And it is the reason for the inner changes to cause changes in the objective universe, although there is no apparent physical reason for these changes to occur. There are many different entities that intervene in human affairs when we work with magic. For example, Michael Aquino claims Set made contact with him when he was in need of advice and gave him a book that would be the foundation for the establishment of the Temple of Set. So, these are my hypotheses. First of all, magic is not a science, but it also looks for knowledge. So, this knowledge is susceptible of analysis to evaluate its validity. Second, innocent realism can give us the basic to check if an entity is real. No matter if it is an entity that existed before human beings or if it has been created by magicians or writers, the entity will be real if it is independent of what you or I or any individual person thinks it is. And then we can use fundamentalism as a means to evaluate the justification of esoteric beliefs. For that purpose, I need to add some extra details. One of them is what Hack calls perceptual evidence state of belief. Perception is understood as that perceived by the senses. However, in magic, there are many examples of things and information perceived in an introspective state. When Michael Aquino received the book from Set, he claims the ideas were coming from an external source. So, among the perceptual evidence states, I will differentiate between inner perceptual evidence states and outer perceptual evidence states. It does not mean that the magician takes for granted as real everything he or her perceives. In these inner perceptual states, it means, in his worldview, this information can be valid, and it needs to be evaluated as the one that is given by the outer perception. When we evaluate the content of belief, there is another particularity. I want to introduce in fundamentalism the magical link. When we talk about the see reasons for a magician, this magical link can be the cause for the event to happen. A magical link cannot be seen in action, and the results are sometimes not the expected ones. That is where the memories and the previous experience of the magician play a fundamental role. If the magical link works, there should be aspects that show the magician that this has worked. Time must be carefully considered. For some practitioners, magical acts must produce immediate results. For others, things may occur after a moon cycle. In other cases, time plays a role when a work is made to obtain two different things and they occur at the same time. The more similar the outcome to the intention of the magician, the more justified. But in some cases, the intention was unchanged and it transformed the environment. For understand how the magical link acted, there is need of a theory of how it works, and this can be very personal. I think that by studying the magical diaries of magicians and its result, how magicians through magic work, and when they acknowledge it didn't work, an epistemic model of justification in magic can be elaborated based on fundamentalism. So we started with a simple question: does magic work? To answer it, I had first to explain what this question has not been asked before. Then I had to establish a basic ontology and an epistemic model. By this work, I have reformulated the question as this one, and I'm more or less justified in believing that the magic I have performed has worked. By doing this, I am trying to make plausible the development of the epistemology of magic. To work into a discipline that has not been explored yet is like going blind into a room full of dynamite. Something can explode in your face. Although considering the recent development of Western esotericism, we are ready to finally make questions about this discipline. Now it is your turn to ask your questions.
Okay, and as Anna has said, now it's your turn. Questions? People a moment to think.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, to me, it brings to mind, I often think of like why scientists think that what they're doing is so different, and like how these are like hard facts when they're all hypotheses as well. And like the way I come into academia, usually talking about magic, is more like through a cultural lens, and that like certain folk magic practices have been happening for hundreds or even thousands of years. And obviously that's a repeated thing that's been proven to be useful over time, and how can scientists or whoever negate that and say it's not kind of a scientific or knowledgeable practice? You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not sure I understood your question. Anyway, I'm going to try to answer. Well, I think the problem with scientific, especially hard sciences, is that they can predict. And they can predict in a very, very certain mode. So you take a phenomena, you put it into a laboratory, and then you can make things happen in the way you know they are going to happen. That has been very successful. Western culture is the daughter of this, but has created the problem that now knowledge is just that, and every other knowledge that is not this kind of knowledge is denied.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think we should do with that? Mm-hmm.
Well, my approach, why I have done this is your question. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm a very rational person, and I also am a magician. So I have been studying philosophy of science, trying to know, okay, what's happening here? Why, if I can get results, is said that it doesn't work? Mm-hmm. So I have tried a philosophical approach, because what philosophy of science and epistemology does is to try to understand why science works. So what I have done is just to go there and to steal some of their tools for magic. So we can use the same tools that epistemologists are using to understand how justification works for magic. And this can give us the background to really understand how magic works without using the objective tools of science. And I think it can give us also some kind of peace of mind. Because society, culture, Western culture has been divided. You are scientists, you have knowledge, but I have my spiritual development, and this is magic. But you know, many magicians I know, they look for results. And we look for results when we perform a ritual. So I have tried to develop a new discipline that gives the magic a new wide field for being studied, not from the point of view of philosophy of religion, but from the point of view of the theory of knowledge in philosophy. That is my answer. There is a question there.
I'd like to about the microphone. We talked today about flow. So within academia, we're using the term flow to look at all phenomena as essentially magical phenomena, because everything, when it becomes a magical event, feels great, and it's all moving, and it has kind of like a hyper efficiency, and so on. Now, if all events are in flow when they are essentially achieving their true will, biologically, psychologically, socially, whatever you want to define it, and all events are intrinsically unique events, if from an epistemological point of view, everything is being perceived interiorly, how do you go about methodologically gathering data for an epistemology of magic?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that's the reason I said that it's very personal, and that's the reason that it's not an objective cast, but a subjective cast. I, as a magician, have the experience of how my personal magical work works. Mm-hmm. I have some feelings when a work is charged. I remember I made a sigil, and it took for me 4 years to charge that sigil, because I didn't find a way. I knew it was not charged, but the moment I charged it, because I found forgotten into a book, after 4 years I made it, it worked. And it worked very, very literally, because there were 2 different things I have asked, and they happened on the same day. And they were official things, so they were published in official bulletins. So it was like, okay, it has worked, and it has worked when I have been able to charge. So I have this personal experience. I know, because I have worked in magic for many years, when it does works. So I can describe my feelings. So by describing this feeling of there is something like bubbling inside me in this moment, and I know the sigil is charged, I know that I'm setting one of the characteristics for a magical work to be to going to work. But maybe for you or for another person from this audience, it will be a different one. It will be, when I am able to charge a sigil, I see a feather. So that's the importance of not an objective way to consider how magic works, but from experiential way.
Just very, very quickly,
yeah.
Disciplinary point of view. There's a chap who is doing parapsychology here at Northampton University, and he spent a lot of time in Society of Psychical Research looking through very, very old documents, which are some of the largest statistical research in very simple, you could call it magical phenomena, like being in a room, staring at someone, and waiting for that person to turn around. Now, from a point of view of evidence gathering, that could be a really useful sort of tool.
Yeah, it's very interesting, but the problem with objective research is that you have a very laboratory experiment, and most of the magic happens in the houses of the people. It happens in the middle of the field. A magician can go out for a walk, and then suddenly he feels this is the moment to do the magical work, and he does, because he has seen a bear flowing around. And you cannot put this person into a laboratory and tell him, okay, do now the magical work, because it's not going to work.
So if the individual is therefore the laboratory, what is the methodology you're reporting in order to fix down that?
Yeah. The methodology is this fundamentism, and that is the result is I have a number of things that work, and I have checked over the years that these things works. So this is the way that it works for me. And then, if we have this kind of research in different diaries of magicians, maybe we will find some commonalities. But we haven't done this research yet.
It may also be that, because I know this conversation has been sort of popped up from time to time, how do you begin to gather the data? And there are tools in the toolboxes of the ethnographers and the sociologists. It's actually a case of sitting the right people down in a room together and getting them to share their tools with each other. But that's the kind of ethnography, because of exactly this whole anecdotal nature of the evidence. It's perhaps one of the social sciences that can kind of help, perhaps, with that.
Thank you. Yes, one more,
We
very,
have
very short.
30 seconds.
Anyway, what philosophy that can do that cannot do social, all the social sciences, that we can reflect, and we can just give ideas of how this could work, and then the ethnographic people, they can do their work.
Passed over to them. Okay, thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.